Good evening. It's Thursday night, March the 13th. Yeah, tomorrow is Friday, the end of the week. And usually I do these in the mornings, but it's Thursday night. Week has been the week after daylight savings, as always, kicks my butt. And I have been so tired each day. So I came on home. I didn't stay till 7 o'clock at school today, and came on home and thinking I'd crash, but I've picked up a little bit of a second wind or second wind. So I thought, well, and my brain is just going. I took my third bell AP students to Knott's Island this past Tuesday, and it went incredibly well. We had some challenges with getting to the ferry with the buses, but we did it. We got there with kind of everybody in the village getting on board and helping getting us there, and on that end they picked us up, and it was just a really great day. The weather, it was very windy that morning, but the weather turned out to be really nice temps that afternoon, and my students are really excited. Come back, and it's always the boots on the ground day. And so usually typically I do it, what I'm going to talk about with students before we go, but things being what they are with AP, I just did not get a chance to do it with before. So we started doing it, looking at it today, and I'm going to be doing it with my first and fourth bell seniors, my academic seniors, tomorrow. So because I take them to Shawboro Elementary next Wednesday, and I'm really excited to say I've got another teacher that is joining me, Heather Boyle, bringing her seniors. So I'm thrilled that the project is expanding within the building. So really excited about that. So I wanted to talk tonight about this book called The Book with No Pictures. This is B.J. Novak is the writer, and you'll notice there is no illustrator listed. And that is because there are no words in this book. So last week I had to, when I had gone up to Virginia for a dental appointment, and I had to run into Target to pick up a couple of things, a gift and some cards. And so I went over to the children's picture book because I was actually picking up a board book for a dear friend whose first grandchild was just born. And so didn't go in with the idea of looking at the CPBs at all, but of course, while I'm there, I'm just kind of browsing and saw this, and I had not seen this before. And so I was like, okay, so I picked it up. The title is what drew me in. Always a good title. I talk to students about titles are like the front doors to a house. It should give the reader hints and suggestions, be engaging without giving it all away, about what they can expect inside in the room of the house. And so I teach students that about titles, period, not just with CPBs, but titles. And so they can be challenged at times, but this is a title that just kind of grabbed me, gets your eyes. What do you mean? A book with no pictures? Because it was in the CPB section. And then I want to show you, before I read a little bit of it and talk about it, I wanted to show you the end pages. The end pages are just words, right? They're words. Now, in this case, there are a couple of words. Most of the words are all in gray, all different font sizes, but you've got one in red and one in yellow. So, let's see. Brrg and brap. And I like that this one right here, you can see how the AP does a little bit differently. Brap AP. And then it's the same thing, the end pages at the end, except the yellow and the words are different. So let's see if I can hold this up to show you. So it's the same thing, but this time the colors have changed. So we've got graph and wacko. So, and the reason I'm doing those voices, it's kind of one of the points of the book. This is a book with no pictures. Literally, that's the first page. It might seem like no fun to have someone read you a book with no pictures. It probably seems boring and serious. Except, here is how books work. Everything the words say, the person reading the book has to say, no matter what. That's the deal. That's the rule. So that means, even if the words say, block! Wait, what? That doesn't even mean anything. Blarf! Wait a second. What? This isn't the kind of book I wanted to read, and I have to say every word the book says? Uh-oh. I am a monkey who taught myself to read. Hey, I'm not a monkey. And now I am reading you this book with my monkey mouth in my monkey voice. That's not true. I am not a monkey. Yes, I am a monkey. Also, I am a robot monkey. What? And my head is made of blueberry pizza. Wait a second. Is this whole book a trick? Can I stop reading, please? No? And now it's time for me to sing you my favorite song. A song? Do I really have to sing a glug, glug, glug? My face is a bug. I eat ants for breakfast right off the rug. What? This book is ridiculous. Can I stop reading yet? No? There are more pages? I have to read the rest? My only friend in the whole wide world is a hippo named Boo Boo Butt. Boo Boo Butt. And also the kid I'm reading this book to is the best kid ever in the history of the entire world. Oh, really? And this kid is the smartest kid too, because this kid chose this book, even though it had no pictures, because kids know this is the book that makes grown-ups have to say silly things. And that's where I'll stop. It's not the end. It's about 2/3 of the way through. So let me tell you how I'm kind of thinking about using this book. So I will say that one of the things that I'm doing with my students tomorrow, as a matter of fact, is in the 4 years that I've been doing this, I've really come to realize that my primary role, my key role as the teacher working with these students, in particular, these are senior students, most of them. I've got AP language students too. But my position my role is to help them position themselves rhetorically as writers, as illustrators, so that they come to the project not all the same way, and they don't exit the same way. And so to really understand that, we have to have an understanding of the rhetorical triangle, which I have been working on since the beginning with this semester's courses. And so that foundation makes for a really nice, foundation for them to understand it. So it's not me laying out, do this, do this, do this, but getting them to be thinking about every step rhetorically. And in order to do that, they have to know what their own desires and needs and values are as writers, as illustrators, as creators. And they have to really know their audience. So the first thing that we're going to do tomorrow is we're going to talk about audiences within audiences. And we're going to do a deep dive of audience analysis. So the obvious thing that they understand right off the bat is that the audience is going to be the first grader that they partner with, the first grader that they interview and spend the day with and get to know his or her values. But what I'm going to have them do is there are other, and that's what I didn't realize when I first started this project. I didn't really think it as deeply about it. but I've come to understand that the audience is a lot deeper than that. So I like to think of it as circles within circles, or like the nesting dolls, if you will. So I have identified like 16, if you will, stakeholders, and actually usually get them to help me identify, okay, then we start off like, okay, who is the audience? So you can think of this as the dartboard, right? The primary audience. And that's the way I'm going to set it up tomorrow, is primary, secondary audience, and tertiary. And they're like, oh, well, the first grader, okay? I'm like, okay, but who else might be in that audience in terms of seeing the book, engaging with the book? And they're like, oh, one student today said, oh, you, Miss Person, because you're going to be, you're going to be the one that's giving us the credit for it. And I'm like, okay, all right, who else? And it's kind of that thing, who else, as we dig, 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 and they start to realize, oh, well, the first grade teacher. Oh, maybe some of the other kids, if they exchange books or let other kids in the first grade see their book. And then they start to realize, oh, they're going to take it home. So their parents and their siblings and possibly their neighbors and possibly people in the community. All right, well, when these kids come to us on the culmination day, who else could be there? And they're like, oh, well, Board of Ed members, central office, the principals at both schools. Oh, and even their mentors are invited and included. It could be other teachers in the high school. And so by doing that, they start to realize there's 16 or more possible, audiences within audiences, primary, secondary, and tertiary. Okay, so why does that become important? And so what I did this last spring, or actually, yeah, was it the spring? Yeah, I guess it was the spring, or maybe it was this past fall. I started putting down rhetorical scenarios, situations that are rooted in real life things that have happened in the past 4 years of doing them. Instead of, and I find again, and I've said this before, I like to come in the back door. I like to get students to think things through. And, the job is to educate, not always just to, all right, you have to follow the rules and intimidate them to follow, or threaten them, or punish them if they don't follow the rules. Because what happens when they leave us, right? And so I'm always thinking about, okay, planting the seeds, doing everything I can to help them come to an understanding and have epiphanies and realize that, the rules that we have in place are there, most of them, to help you be better and to help you do better. And so when they realize that, they don't invest the energy in trying to break them, to prove that, hey, I can break your rules. So I'm always trying to look for more subtle ways, I guess, to truly educate and get them to think about things instead of just, okay, here are the rules, here are the do's and don'ts, you don't do this. And so these scenarios are based on things that have really happened. So what I do is I put painter's tape down and I make a grid. And the grid, the y-axis, represents the reader, or not the reader, I'm sorry, the writer, the illustrator, the author, the creator, okay? So it runs on one end, so we're thinking about the reader and the writer, his or her needs and desires. So at the very top is the needs are completely met, highly satisfied. All right, with any kind of rhetorical exercise. And at the bottom, the needs are not met at all, very unsatisfied, deeply unsatisfied. Well, then you put that on the x-axis, which represents the audience, primary, secondary, and tertiary, all those things. Primarily, we're focusing, of course, on the first grader, but that x-axis goes from highly ineffective in a negative sense in terms of the work, and it runs over to highly effective in a very positive way. So what I do is I read a statement, a scenario, and I ask the students to go place themselves where they think they need to be positioned for this. And so you end up having, of course, 4 quadrants, and I have them turn and talk to each other a little bit about why they're there, and then we share out and there's discussion. And so the scenarios run from, okay, you want to create a wordless picture book, right? Because you are really good at drawing, and there is such a thing. And so you're going to create a narrative using only illustrations. So how satisfying is that to you if that's what you want to do as the writer, the illustrator, or in this case, I mean writer in terms of composing but not written work, and how effective would that be with your first grader? And what we end up doing and discussing is they begin to see it's a really complex thing and there's not one right answer on all of these. And in the end, what I talk to them is about is getting a totality. When you take all of this together, all the different components of this, it's not just one assignment, one thing. I want you to come out feeling like you have gotten several of your needs met as a writer, as an illustrator, as the creator, while trying to be as highly effective as you can with your audience. And sometimes, depending on what the scenario is, you have to give more. So, for example, we talk about editing in conventions, and then they start realizing, oh, I'm doing the best I can, but maybe I need to do a better job editing. Maybe I need to get other people to look at it. And that's actually, and I'll have to do another video on another night about the mentors, but I put mentors into place last semester and I really want to tweak that. I'm really excited about that. But they begin to realize that it's not just about their needs. So I think the key is what I call the Goldilocks, not too much of this, not too much of that, but just right. And then hopefully that by the totality, the comprehensive piece of it, where they're looking at all of it, they have found a really good balance. So one of the things that I'll share is that with authors' bios, I had a student a couple years ago. It had been edited. It had been turned in and edited and checked off, who then turned around and changed the author's bio in the children's picture book after I had already looked at it and the original. And the change involved the student writing about themselves, saying that they were a transgender student at Currituck County High School. And it just so happened that the day, that book came in and it was put out on the table the day that the first graders were coming. And I was going through and perusing and happened to see that. And I thought, oh my goodness. Because I immediately started thinking about this in terms of audience and how this could land. And it's not about what I think personally about that situation. It's not about even what the high school student, the writer creator, thinks. It's about the first grader. The other thing that comes into play is that on some of these things, we don't have a choice. In North Carolina, Bill 49, we have the Parents' Bill of Rights. And it's very clear about what is considered appropriate, particularly for elementary, and what is not. And so instead of telling students, I'm sorry, you can't write about these things, you can't mention it. Again, I could do that because that is the law and we have to follow the law. But I think it's better if we approach it as a discussion so they understand, again, this is one that because of the law, I'm going to have to come down and be unsatisfied, but be more effective with my audience in this. There are other scenarios, other parts of this project that I can have my needs met. So I think it's about balancing it. And it's an easier way, I think, about going about things and getting them to realize that if you want to be effective with an audience rhetorically, sometimes you have to put other things ahead of your own needs. So it's an interesting discussion. One of the scenarios is, could I do a book with only pictures? I had somebody that did that a year ago and was very effective with it, particularly for his first grader, made sure that was appropriate. He was a great illustrator. And actually, in some ways, it's more work because you've got to figure out your narrative first. So even though it doesn't have words, you have to figure out the narrative. You have to compose everything with pictures. And I have a couple of wordless picture books in my classroom library. But this is the first time that I've seen the book with no pictures. And it's interesting because that was one of the scenarios. What if I don't do any pictures? Now, I've had a student before that really struggled. This was 2 years ago, that struggled with illustrations, just could not even come up with an idea of what could be illustrated. And I sat down, conferred with his student multiple times and tried different things and just were not getting anywhere. He had his story written. He had already drafted his story. And but he really had a hard time when he looked at, needs to be an illustration here. I don't know what I should draw. I have no idea what I should draw. So after a lot of sit down conferring sessions, I posed him. I said, what if we were to try AI and we were to put your story in that you've drafted and say, could you suggest what would be a good illustration? What would be something to draw here? And he perked up and he loved that and he did that. The thing was, he didn't take up all of the pages in the children's picture book. So he ended up he had finished the story, but he still had pictures, or I should say, picture-less pages. And so this came up today as a scenario. And so I posed that, what if you were to do a book with no pictures? And it was really interesting because some of them got into the science of reading, one of the primary purposes is to help them learn to read. Some of them knew some about the science and said, well, it depends on the kid. It depends on how well he can imagine. But at the same time, they talked about if you were trying to teach the word apple, for example, and you get kids that just latch onto the picture and they are not reading phonetically and able to decode that word, it can actually be unhelpful to have pictures there. And then you had other kids that said, yes, but then there are those that need the imagination, that help they need because they are struggling. So and not every book should be just for, quote, learning to read, Miss Person. There needs to be storytelling so that they can also understand that there is value in the stories themselves. So they got at all different kinds of purposes, and it was a great discussion. I loved hearing the different points of view and the different things that they were bringing out. So I thought that I would take this book in because I've not shown them. So I'm going to take them in and show them this. And I love how this is playing with color and with voice. And I'll share one last thing, is that the whole thing with voice brings out another whole dimension with it. Last semester, for the first time, I had a student that ended up doing did his book illustrated. It was part of there were two of them working together, so one did the first book and his was the follow-up, the second book, so they worked together on their story. But Josh ended up turning around and he put a QR code in his book, and if I can, I'm going to try to post it so that you can hear it. What he did is he went into AI and used, I can't remember what you can look at if I post it, you can see what the app was, but used AI to harness Mr. Beast's voice, because a lot of these kids and a lot of my students love Mr. Beast, and had Mr. Beast read Josh's, with AI obviously, but read his story and put the QR code there so that when he gave the child the book, not only did he have the book and the first grader can read the book and look at the illustrations, but he can scan if he gets a phone, his parent's phone, he can hear the book being narrated as well in Mr. Beast's voice, which brings up a whole other element about the fluency and the expression of the vocalization of the book. And I love how this book really plays with that, just letting the words and the sounds of language being the enticing piece itself. And I don't know that I would say that it's subbing or substituting for the pictures, but it certainly fills in a whole nother dimension. So that's going to be another way that I'm going to use this book, is to talk to kids about the importance of inflection, that expression, that expressive reading, and even encourage them, what if you did record yourself or have some other celebrity or somebody that's important to that child read it and record it and put that in with a QR code in your book, and it makes it even more interactive. So I'm really excited about the groups that I'm working with this semester, and it seems like there's just every semester, every year, there are more components that are being added, and just deeper work, more quality work, always rooted in love, though. So it continues to give me so much joy on this end of my career that I'm very grateful for the project, and it seems to be how it seems to be growing. So anyway, just wanted to share that with you. Happy weekend, and I hope you are blessed. Bye.